I want to briefly go over a couple of things that I have found when I have worked with victims of various types of crimes. What can be done to help them? From my understanding, a lot of this School of Technology, you're going to be either teaching or working in some kind of a technological field. When you work with them as a teacher, a lot of times you're spending more time with them as a teacher in a classroom than their parents spend with them. You're going to be with them for 6 or 8 hours a day, and I guarantee you, someday a child's going to come to you and say, something happened to me and I want to talk to you about it because you are one of my 5. I always tell when I talk to parents, I say you got to have your children have their 5. They're 5 grown-ups that they can trust. So if they have 5 grown-ups that they can go to, a lot of times if you're a teacher, you're going to fall into one of those 5 just because of the amount of time that you spend with children. Say thank you. Thank you for telling me. Thank you so much for trusting me. And I don't care if this is your child or your roommate or a student that comes to you and says this, say thank you for trusting me, for telling me this. Another thing that you need to make sure you don't do is should on them. Don't should on them at all. Don't say you should have run away. You should have never gone over to that place. Why didn't you run? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you fight back? Those kind of things, that is a form of victim blaming and victim shaming. And we do not want to do any of that at all.
One of the things I think is very important to also say is I believe you.
I believe you. I believe you. Children will lie to get out of trouble, not to get into trouble. And it's more likely that a child will recant what they have said when they start to see how disruptive this has become. Maybe it leads to a divorce of their parents. Maybe it leads to them having to move to a new town or having to leave school. But that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Create a loving, enriching, supporting environment for that victim as much as you can, depending on the appropriate role, whether it's you're a teacher or a roommate or a parent, so that if you do have a child that's being abused, that you have some kind of a stewardship over, that they will feel coming from a toxic environment into a loving environment, they're going to know, I feel different when I'm here being loved, and just giving them that kind of environment, knowing that there's something better out there. Stay active in kids' lives. Don't tolerate abuse of any kind. Just don't tolerate it. Don't say, oh, that's in their marriage, that's just between them, I'm going to stay out of this. Or start to ask questions, be curious. You may be able to help somebody. If it's appropriate, depending on your role with a child, talk to them about boundaries. Boundaries is a really important thing. Most abusers, when we talk to children about, we talk to them about a fog. And this fog, whenever their mind starts to feel foggy, are you being manipulated by fear, obligation, or guilt? So that's the FOG, that's the acronym for FOG, is fear, obligation, and guilt. And sometimes we call this the spider sense, when you start to feel danger, or the oh feeling, or the fog. If someone's talking to you or somebody's trying to get you to do something that you are just not comfortable doing, are they using these tactics of fear, obligation, or guilt? It is very normal for a child to have behavior problems when there is transition in a home, especially if it's going to be a sad transition. Some signs of abuse, and it's different depending on the type of abuse. If we start to see low self-esteem, okay, a child having either physical or emotional self-harm, if they start cutting themselves, that is a red flag, and that needs to be assessed by a professional. When people start cutting themselves, that's a cry for help. We got to figure out, what are they crying for help for? If we start seeing behavior problems, that can also be an indicator of a cry for help. What are they crying out for help for? Is it that they don't have a physical need being met, or an emotional need, or are they being damaged in some way and they just don't know how to express that something bad is happening to them, and so they are self-sabotaging and self-harming in some way? Physical abuse is often more easy to identify, and I'm not saying that kids don't get hurt. Kids break their arms, kids get hurt, Kids, they have bruises all over their legs all the time because they're jumping off stuff and being rough. And so it's not if you see a bruise that kid's being abused, but if they start to lie to you about what happened, okay? If their story is not straight, if they tell you one day they broke their arm because they fell down the stairs and the next day it's because they were playing soccer, then that is a cause for concern. A lot of times with children who are being sexually abused, we see the isolation part of it, but we also see that they sometimes will start to act out in inappropriate sexual behaviors or having inappropriate trying to seek out those encounters with other students or speaking about those kinds of things. One of the things that's really important is building that trust and doing it while children are small, especially if you're a parent and you are able to be with a child or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, talking to them when they're small about the cool stick they found or something they built out of Legos. Because if they know that they can trust you and talk to you about these small things in their lives, as they get bigger and their problems get bigger, they know that they can trust you with those big things as well. Being a victim, whether you're a child victim or a victim of teen violence or cyberbullying, there's 3 common things that I have found between all victims and abusers. Isolation. Whether it is social isolation or physical isolation or emotional, that there is isolation. That abuser will isolate their victim. The other thing that we find in all abuse, and it doesn't matter if it's financial abuse or physical abuse, all of this abuse is about, or it could even be legal abuse, it's about power and control. It's about maintaining that power and control. You know, an example is there was a case that the police were called out to a house for a domestic disturbance. And when they got in the house, nobody was hurt. There were some people that were upset, but nobody was hurt. And as the police were getting people's statements and, you know, did he hit you? No, he never hit me. The police was leaving and they noticed these holes in the wall down the hallway. And the officer said, what happened here? And then she said, well, every time I do something he doesn't like, he punches a hole in the wall and he says, next time that's your face. And so every time she walked down the hall to go to her bedroom or to take care of her children, and he wouldn't allow her to fix it and he wouldn't fix it himself, she would know, next time that's my face. Next time that's my face. It was never about hitting, okay? It's, in fact, a perpetrator of physical violence only has to, you know, usually hit a couple of times in order to put in that fear that they will be hurt if the abuser is not able to maintain that power and control. One of the things that I have learned about legislation is not everybody talks to each other. And we actually in the state of Oregon have wonderful laws to protect victims of any type of crime. We have wonderful laws to protect children, but unless there's enforcement and accountability, those laws mean nothing. I am a firm believer in accountability, and I believe in the law. We have a lot of great laws that protect children from having to ever go to custody of abusers. If there's any domestic violence whatsoever, according to our law in the state of Oregon and even our federal law, it says that that abuser should never get custody, ever. But is that law being followed? So we obviously have some work to do, and part of that work is what we're doing here, and that's coming and speaking with all of you and helping to educate about prevention.